got to tell you that, man. The more I listen to Musk, the more I'm like, he and I, two peas in a pod.
I'm gonna save that audio and you later by having that be the recording that you're aligning yourself with Musk.
I just, the guy's like, I don't know. He's out there, but he's saying all the same things that I believe. Not for our listeners, to be clear. I'm not political at all. I'm talking about his visions for technology. Bang on.
Sure, it's difficult to separate the crazy racism that he has baked into every thought he has these days. So the white replacement theory is the thing he's worried about now. Like, come on, what stupid thing is he going to do to software because he's concerned about white people not having enough babies? Like,
if we go back and cancel every racist American who's done good in the world, there's not going to be a ton of stuff left. There's a lot of people in the past in this country who did bad things, but we accept their inventions, right? We don't cancel their inventions. So I'm just saying.
Only because we don't have a choice. Only because no one really understood that Henry Ford was a giant anti-Semite.
Yeah.
And we're fully screwed. The world has been screwed by car culture and everything that's been built up and the geopolitical nonsense of needing oil. So Henry Ford's anti-Semitism, I would gladly cancel.
Yeah, like, let's go through the list, right? Audi, BMW, Volkswagen. There's so many more companies on that list, but we kind of just got to carry on regardless, right? So yes, Musk is right here and now. Somebody has to worry about him. That's you guys. His vision for the future, though, they will look back and say, wow, he was right, wasn't he? So was that other guy. Remember the guy from the podcast, Andrew?
Let's be clear. You think he's plugging chips into people's brains and he thinks AI utopia is... I haven't actually read the article because I just don't need to digest anything from Elon Musk.
Every company just is one letter. Is that his vision for the future?
Exactly.
You know what? How many trees is he saving by people not having to type the full Twitter out? He's saving trees over time, so there you go. Giving back.
Yep. The 7 characters you save will absolutely, in 150 years, have saved 3 trees.
Yeah.
3 trees is yes. 3 trees.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, his vision's spot on.
Welcome to Acceptance Criteria, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of how software gets made and how we can all do a better job together. My name is Kevin Thomas Euland, and across the chat from me is Andrew Greener. Say hi, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew. We're also here to get deeper on the human element. I could go on for an eternity about the people and how they think about the process of building complex systems. And I can't think of 2 better people to do that than Kevin and I.
That's right, we're your nightly news dynamic duo today. This is going to be a recurring and random episode that we drop from time to time where we look at a few news items that have come out in the past few weeks. It's a grab bag episode. But first, a friendly reminder that we're always interested in hearing questions directly from you, our listeners, for our segment User Stories. If you've got a scenario you'd like help with, whether it's working with an engineering or product team member, trying to figure out how to solve an agile process problem, or you just can't understand why your favorite app updated everything and it's now terrible, we're here to talk it through with you. You can send those questions to acceptancepod@gmail.com or submit them on the Discord in the User Stories channel, and we might be able to help on a future episode. And we're happy to keep it anonymous so no one can trace it back to you if you end up talking a coworker or something. But before we get to all of that, let's take a short break and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. We don't have a cringe little segment name for this. We're just going to talk about a few news stories that came out recently and see where the conversation takes us. Devin is a new AI software engineer. It is from a company that has released this. I'm actually not sure if it's released. I watched a couple of the videos of them showing scenarios where this, like, it's not real yet, right? This is just purely...
No, it's not real.
Okay.
You can go on the waiting list to get Devin, but it is not real yet.
But it is this, if you watch the videos for it, I don't know that I want to totally promote this to people and seeing it, but it's interesting interesting alleged advancements in the ability to type in a prompt and say, I need a, project that does X, Y, and Z. And Devin will go and do, supposedly from start to scratch, go create the React app, go and write a bunch of the code. You can say, here's an existing repo. Please go read the repo and fill in any missing unit tests you don't find. And it looked like some of the examples were like, Devin got that 80% correct. And then you had to go and type 3 more sentences to say you missed doing the unit test for X, Y, and Z. Please change the threshold from, 1 to 4. Like, it seemed like it was reactive to that. But the problem is all of it is curated scenarios. And I think I have seen enough examples where these large language models are just regurgitating whatever was fed into them. And so it doesn't matter how intelligent it looks at first. I don't know. I'm not convinced that even it just seems like these models are not actually where you would want this to be to actually provide. And there's some interesting benefit we talked about in the AI episode. If I could have the people doing the next Spider-Verse movie have the AI do the stupid background characters that populate New York City and let them spend time doing the important stuff, that's good. If I could have an AI software engineer write unit tests for me, which I absolutely hate, that'd be good. But also, unit tests should be the first thing you write, not the thing you fill in later. So who's this? I don't know. There's a bunch of weird things where like maybe it's possible, but
yeah, it's going to be possible, right? So here's the deal. Here's where I've refined my thinking over the last few weeks. I was working with an engineer recently, and they were telling me about their use case and what they fed into ChatGPT and what they got back out again. And I realized, it made me realize something. Actually, it's going to be interesting because until you can have people feeding ChatGPT with the right prompt that understand engineering problems, you can't really get rid of the engineer, because the engineer might not be writing the code, but they're actually explaining the problem to ChatGPT to get the code. There's not other professions right now that can speak in engineering terms. So I did refine my thinking where I was like, well, you can't kill the software engineer off, because it's actually the software engineer who's going to explain to ChatGPT what I need. So that prolongs the life of the engineer in my mind, right? They're going to become a little bit more like architects. Here is a design pattern. Here's what I need. And then they'll explain it to ChatGPT. And then they'll have to check it, because ChatGPT will be stupid and not realize like, well, you just introduced a recursive function that has an infinite loop. It's not going to know that, but you would know. So I think they're going to carry on. With regard to the unit test, that's a perfect example of where we've all inherited code that didn't have unit testing.
Sure.
And we always think to ourselves, oh, at some point we'll go back and that piece of technical debt, we'll write the unit test.
Right.
We never do. But in that instance, to have ChatGPT do it for me, or whatever model does that for me, that is hugely beneficial.
Sure, but that feels like the kind of thing where, okay, great, every single team starts doing that, and in 5 years, that's no longer, you fixed it, you solved the problem. That's the reason why medical pharma companies don't want to actually create vaccines and cures, because the revenue potential of a thing that you give to the entire population once, and now there's no future revenue stream from it. Devin, solving your unit test problem runs out of revenue roadmap in 5 years, which maybe that's fine. Yeah.
But let's equate it. Let's not look at it from a revenue perspective, and let's look at it from a post office horizon. Let's look at it as, did we reduce cost? Did we reduce, because you know me, my fascination is how much money do companies waste with bad engineering practices that they don't track? It's like, cool, here's our revenue. It's like, yeah, great. What's your burn rate, right? And like, how much of that is waste? Most big companies don't do a very good job at tracking the waste. So the question for me is, will it improve the quality of software and in some cases save lives, right? Reduce the potential for a horizon ever happening again. When you get to the revenue side and the people getting replaced, I could stretch it out a few more years. Maybe it's changed my thinking a little bit to say, like, engineers will be around, but only until we solve some of the problems that I just described, which is an engineer has to explain the problem to the system to get the code out. The minute they figure that piece out, then I can start to see engineers going away.
My problem with that, though, is also it's only as good as the code that was fed into it, and how much code was actually fed into it. So, tell me.
But come on, like we've all worked with engineers whose code should never have seen the light of day, right? Like I've written code where I'm like, that probably shouldn't have seen the light of day. I'm okay.
No, you're not. So you've gotten rid of a bunch of engineers because they were writing crappy code, and you're okay with ChatGPT also writing crappy code?
No,
ChatGPT is trained on Stack Overflow and a bunch of stuff. It's not trained on Oracle's source code and Oracle knowing how to optimize crazy SQL indexing concerns and Hadoop. I mean, Hadoop is open source, I suppose, but it depends on who you're training your code on. So I have a
and that's the
ceiling.
gap.
There's a ceiling of what ChatGPT is ever going to produce, because the really smart people, either it was open source and you could train it on it, or it wasn't. And a good chunk of our really smart technology is not open source. So at some point, ChatGPT has a ceiling, doesn't it?
But a lot of the really good software is open source. You look at Apache NiFi was built by the NSA. Do I think they're the greatest engineers in the world? They're not the greatest engineers in the world, but they were building a platform that could steal all of our cell phone data, right? Like
Sure.
these guys are no chumps when it comes to scaling. And to me, Netflix, LinkedIn, Microsoft, Google, they all have open source technology.
Closed source, closed source, closed source. They've open sourced some things, but they have not open sourced the real secret sauce.
They've open sourced some. You look at Netflix open source, it's award winning, right? Like
Sure.
Eureka, and they have Spinnaker. There is so much good open source that I guarantee you I will get a decent data access layer out of ChatGPT.
What you won't
as
get,
good as a human.
What you won't, well, fine, but then what you won't, as fine as the C plus, I shouldn't say C plus, that's a programming language, the C minus engineer who you want to fire. Yes, there's going to be cases. Yes, there are going to be cases where the AI is too stupid to recognize the recursive function, doesn't understand why a switch is not the right way to do that. You should actually do, or doesn't really realize why if else is a bad thing. You should do a switch. All of these things that are going to be small little problems. And your point is, well, they're only 10% of the code, and that's much better than the crap I got out of the C minus engineer.
I guarantee
but
you.
But then, no, I'm not done with my point, so shut up. So the problem is you now have lost the engineering skill set to look at the code that ChatGPT produced. Yeah, you just fired a bunch of engineers. So now I have fewer engineers putting in architecture comments and being able to troubleshoot whether the code that ChatGPT creates is good enough.
How many software engineers understand what cyclomatic complexity is? Less than 10%.
And you're not improving that situation. Your solution doesn't make it better. Your solution doesn't make it better either.
It does. It does, because the same rules that govern systems like SonarQube that tell me why my code has smells will be fed to these models, and they will write code that doesn't have the same smells that humans don't even know they're introducing, where it's nested if-elses and switches inside of that nested if-elses. Like humans, some developers, those guys will still have jobs to write the secret sauce and the fine-tuned optimized code, but the guys writing the CRUD and the data access layers, I guarantee you AI is going to start to eat into some of those jobs in our lifetime.
But you haven't solved, you're admitting that the AI is not writing 100% good code, and we're not making the people who need to review that code better.
Wait, no. I am saying the AI is not writing 100% optimized code, but I am saying it's writing better code than the humans.
Yeah, but you're not engaging me with my critique here, which is, if it's not writing 100% good code, who is making sure that it's getting better? You don't have a person who can do that.
I understand that, but that doesn't take 150 software engineers, right? Like, even if it's 25 or 50 engineers who are working in making sure that, okay, cool, this code is not great, we got a problem, we need to update the model, right? But that's not 150 engineers anymore. That's 50 specialized guys who are sensitive to the model and sensitive to code, and they're going to be the ones who fine-tune it to say, hey, it's 0.002% better this month because of the tweaks we made to the model, and we fed it some more code. But you're not going to need 150 engineers anymore. You'll just need the 50 to verify that the code and the AI will not be 100 engineers. It will be writing the code of 1,000 engineers.
And so now an engineer's job is ChatGPT monitor? Who wants
but
that
it's already
job?
become that. I was working with an engineer in the last year, and we were tackling a problem, and it was like, I solved this in 5 minutes with ChatGPT. They're doing it already. They're writing code already through ChatGPT. They're just the same people that are trying to be protected from ChatGPT. And that's the bit that I say you can't close that gap yet, because it still needs a software engineer until the business guy or the Gen AI guy can walk into the engineer's world and say, hey, I need a recursive function that does this, blah, 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 blah. Oh, by the way, you created an infinite loop here because my data model is not that simple. There's going to be instances where the child is actually the parent of its own ancestry. Until you can have somebody who can talk that problem through, the engineers will have to keep explaining to ChatGPT what's wrong with the code. And I'm saying eventually we won't need as many of those people. It's going to happen in the same way that people used to look at cars and say, how is it going to put the windscreen in? That machine, there's no way that machine can put that windscreen moving in without breaking the glass. And it did. It just did, right? So it's going to happen. Now, I'm not saying, what I did say earlier was I admit that I'm beginning to loosen my grip on, could we see new industries get created where those people can then go work? And I'm saying I'm open to that idea. I just don't know what those industries are. Do we have a lot more data entry people now who are feeding the models, right? And this is the question. Should software engineers be looking at AI, Gen AI, and data science? And absolutely, that is my advice. I get asked that all the time. Should I be looking at AI and Gen AI? Absolutely. Because there'll be jobs, right? There'll be jobs where you didn't go and have a traditional machine learning background or a data science background, but that doesn't mean you can't learn. You don't necessarily need to have done statistics and linear algebra to work inside of data science and artificial intelligence. Some of the engineers who write code today could go do those jobs, but they need to go get retrained. So,
and depending on what the job is, by the way, there's a whole thing where a bunch of these companies have been paying pennies on the dollar to global south people who they can take advantage of to do all of the data entry that these giant models need. So the capitalist solution is not going to be taking the $150,000 a year engineer and letting them get retrained to be a better data science data entry person. No, they're going to go and find the people in Bangalore who they can pay $5 and have them do that. So it is a bloodbath for this industry.
I will say this. Here's my comparison. If I'm a human and I look at a piece of complex code that ChatGPT wrote, how quickly will I find the bug? But if I give a piece of complex code written by a human to ChatGPT, it will find the bug in seconds. Now, granted, I agree. If the model is mature enough and it's being fed enough of the right data, right, there's going to be instances that model, nothing ever comes back. We'll close the gap on that. But that is it should scare people when they think about how quickly the machine can recognize a bug. Even in interviews, I've been in interviews where they say, what is wrong with this code? A few hundred lines, right? And it can take you a while. You can doubt yourself and like, oh, the modifier, like, is this method modifier and the class modifier? Like, you can second guess yourself, but the systems, it doesn't have those, it doesn't second guess, right? It's going to recognize those problems. That is a scary thought for me.
Sure, there have been enough situations where the promises of these models, maybe ChatGPT 5 is going to figure out some of these things, but there have been situations where I'm not convinced it's actually as smart as the examples that we're seeing. And part of that is training data, and part of that is it's still like some of these models hallucinate. For some of these models get a weird thing it's inserted and they speak Spanish for 3 days. There's a bunch of things where it's not, don't just shrug your shoulder at me. You don't know what my point is yet. You don't know what my point is yet. I haven't arrived at my point. So the problem I have is we're now going to have an entire industry of people who don't actually need to learn software engineering. And it goes back to my question of who bug fixes the bug fixer. We now have this escalating death spiral of more and more elite engineers who are the only ones who actually got to figure out how to code the thing, because who's programming the model? Who is troubleshooting the base thing? A bunch of engineers for the next 20 years don't need to write a bunch of their own code. They don't need to do it because Devin's doing it for them. And so our engineering knowledge, you can critique the C- engineers, but the number of people out there who have tried to make this their skill set and get better at it has grown, which can only be good. For now, we're turning, because now we have the opportunity to find, of the 100,000 people who are doing this, sure, I don't know whether it's 40,000 or 60,000, some percentage of them are taking this on as a second type of job. They're not fully trained for it. Their aptitude isn't, like, there's a bunch of reasons why we have bad engineers, but we have a bigger pool to find the good engineers. And as more of this goes away and has the machine do it for us, then why would I want to go down the engineering career path if there's only ever going to be 1,200 jobs available? Because engineering becomes a less and less thing. I'm the person typing smart sentences into a chatbot. Okay, but who's the person who wrote the chatbot? Who's the person who writes the next really crazy, impressive data scaling thing that we need? The AI is only ever going to be as smart as its inputs. So the people writing the innovative new code, who's writing the next Hadoop that's going to revolutionize the way we process petabytes of data in a millisecond, that person now is even more elite because it's only going to be the 17 people who thought there was a career opportunity for them because they went to MIT. Like, it gets worse for this industry if we go down this road. And I get that you're saying the genie's out of the bottle, but but I can be upset by, I can see some impacts of what
Yeah.
letting the genie out is, and I don't think they're good.
But it's and you get into one of the books that I'll never write, which is I believe that we propel each other, right? Like until we're merged, which I do believe we will be, probably not in our lifetimes, right? But we will eventually merge. But we have to self-propel. Like AI has to show us the complexity it doesn't understand, and then there will be an elite group of people who stay in engineering and can tackle those problems, right? But eventually it'll hit a limit where there's no more problems to solve, right? Like I just
In 3,000 years?
no, I don't think so. Not in our lifetime. Don't worry, you'll be dead, dude. You don't even need to worry about it. Like
Cool.
this more and more, right? Look, I'm not the only one. More and more people are starting to ask the question. This isn't my dream. It's not what I love. It's not what I was born to do, right? I have other passions. How long before the society tears itself down from the I have to go to work every day? So people are starting to talk about it. Like, what if AI can replace us all and we have this utopia with post scarcity, right? You know, you're optimistic, right? I'm the one who's like, there's going to be a sting. I like the fact that people are starting to ask that question. I like the fact that people walked away. I heard today that the reason why it's almost impossible to get an appointment at the dentist is because after COVID, many of them just walked away and never came back. I love to hear of these people actually going to live their lives and be like, hey, cool, I used to have passions once upon a time before I went to college and started working. This is a little bit of me being optimistic. Maybe we can start to look at some of those like post-scarcity like solutions, right? So that when this thing happens, when the jobs go, some of us are like prepped for it and say, well, it's okay. I've got my writing. I've got my whatever it is that makes me happy every day. And I've got enough food and I've got a decent enough house and a plot of land and I'm happy. There's my optimism for the week, right?
Sure. That feels like stagnation to me. That feels like I get the idea of anyone who wants to be an artist can now be an artist, and I'm not disagreeing with that, but I don't know. The ways that we get there sound like they need to have people doing some hard work. The idea that if we ever want to go and like leave this planet, like Elon wanting to go terraform Mars, I think is a dumb idea, but we're not going to get to a Star Trek future if we don't have any engineers in 500 years. How is this not the slow death of humanity when we have no problems facing us and everyone gets to go and just be an artist? I don't know. I'm not saying I'm disagreeing with you. I worry. I don't know that leads you to interesting possibilities for humanity.
No, yeah, no. Remember, I'm the one who believes there's going to be a sting. So I'm like, yeah, no. In the next, probably after I'm gone, there's going to be hell to pay when people are like, "What do you want us to do?" Because remember, it's not just about having a job. The college route doesn't make any sense anymore.
No.
It's like I'm going to college for what? There's no engineering jobs. Like there's no. I can't go to work in a law office because all the backroom jobs have been replaced, and I don't need to go search through legal books anymore for arguments and precedents because that's all done electronically now. Like, yeah, it's going to suck.
But there is a post-scarcity world that still has interesting technology and advances and things that stretch people's brains who want it to stretch their brain. And in the AI version of that, it's a post-scarcity like Wall-E, where we're all just slugs consuming whatever
No.
we want, and there's nothing.
Remember, we both agree on the destination.
I'm starting to think we don't. I'm starting to think we
disagree
don't.
on how you get there. I believe that in the future there'll be new and exciting jobs. For example, let's dream for a second. Let's put our sci-fi hats on. Artificial intelligence and quantum computing leads to us cracking how to land on other planets and do interesting things, right? Like there's going to be a science arena, but that's not the professions of today, right? There's going to be interesting medical challenges, but that is not that is still an elite field today. So there's going to be a lot of jobs, I think, at the destination when we get there, which is like, hey, medicine actually jumped to the forefront of our minds, and it's not just pharmaceutical companies making money. It's actually, as a society, we can prevent cancer and we can detect defects at birth and we can fix them genetically and yada, yada, yada. But the timelines don't work.
But the problem I'm starting to have as we dig into this more is the secondary part of the sting and the gap is, the Dark Ages wasn't a thing. There wasn't actually a Dark Ages. That's a misnomer from the Renaissance. But
yeah.
this could it be an actual dark ages in which the AI dumbs us down because we no longer need engineers to go and write a bunch of stuff, and the AI is just giving us pre-fed answers and doing 80% of what we need to. And part of the sting in the gap is we're all too stupid to actually understand how to build AI 3.0 because we stopped being engineers because there was no financial incentive for it. And even worse, possibly, there's this like elite cadre of 10,000 engineers who now rule the world, and their kids are the only ones allowed to become engineers. Like, it gets real bad in certain hypothetical scenarios. And then you're hoping that we come out of the other side of the gap like we did the Renaissance and realize a bunch of people could go and do this again and learn this. And that's how the Industrial Revolution and the modern medical, situation came about. But that's scary and crappy. I'm still not convinced we need to go down that road. We can get to post scarcity without the gap and without the sting and without sacrificing our ability to learn new things. And I know the genie's out of the bottle and I'm screwed, but I don't know.
But I don't like it either. I'm just telling you what is going to happen. I'm not telling you what should happen. And that's the difference, right? Is like, remember, like as an architect, my world, the biggest frustration in my world is that entities don't plan and they don't do things sensibly, right? It's just big companies have that challenge. So it is in my profession to say, hey, if we're very careful and we're holistic about this, we can be very efficient and running lean. This is what no big companies ever do, is right. It's like we can maximize the margin because we're running lean and we're getting the absolute value for our customers, and the margin is incredible because we run so lean. So that is in my very nature as an architect to want to be that way. But I don't see a lot of evidence of the outside world that is the case, right? Like, that is not the world we live in. So no. I'm just saying, get ready for the sting.
Sure. Next up is generative AI providers quietly tamp down expectations. There was an article talking about how a lot of companies are worried that they've overpromised, and now that people are actually using ChatGPT in a bunch of places, it's not actually doing what they sold it doing, and it's not quite there yet. ChatGPT 5 maybe makes capabilities there. So there's entire industries now being like, well, actually, when we sold you, you could fire all of those people. Well, maybe you shouldn't have.
You know what? This is a non-story. This is there's a minority who, granted, they could be big use cases and it was big money, but honestly, I do not believe that we will. It's a bump in the road. It's a speed bump.
Sure, it's a speed bump affecting. It's Microsoft, Amazon, and Google all saying that they've had to dial back expectations, and their sales team got out ahead of themselves, and the cloud is not actually going to enable these AI solutions for you as quickly as they had promised. So once again, a little mini bubble of technology people saying, oh, we can solve all of your problems, and actually it's like, no, it's I don't know. AI is doing things, but it's not doing as much as was sold to people. Shocker.
Yeah, most industries and most teams using AI will not feel that pinch. I guarantee it. There's probably a few fringe cases.
You can't just say you guarantee it. You can't just say you guarantee it. Executives at Amazon, Google, and Microsoft disagree with you.
I know, I get it, but they're talking about that. That's what I'm saying.
You're smarter than all of that leadership together?
I'll do a Kevin Hewlett here and say, are they feeling the pinch on some big deals that they made and overpromised? Yeah, sure. Are they going 105 miles an hour, and should they be going 95 miles an hour? Probably, sure. Uh-huh. Is it a mere speed bump? Absolutely, yeah.
Uh-huh. Sure.
It's a speed bump. It's not the beginning of a crack to the foundation. It slows us down. Cool, we're going 95 now.
I think a lot of people are making assumptions that ChatGPT 4, ChatGPT 5 are going to continue to make progress, and there's enough weirdness and enough uncertainty about how some of these things work. I'm not convinced we might not be on, for the next 20 years, we're at the ChatGPT ceiling, and then they will finally figure out how to make ChatGPT 5 actually do the thing, and maybe it will happen. But ChatGPT 3 and 4 are not at that level currently, and I don't know. Maybe I'm not happy to be wrong. I hope I'm right, but I can imagine absolutely there's a chance I'm wrong. But there's also an equal chance right now that we have hit a ceiling, and
no, it absolutely is. There's a couple of big deals in a couple of areas of business, but I mean the numbers don't lie, right? Like,
what numbers? No. You don't just get to say random statements. What numbers?
The billions of dollars that are changing hands for AI and Gen AI solutions, the NVidia relationship with Snowflake for machine learning in the cloud. Like, it's gone, right? Like, it's out there, right? And there's a couple of
But
fringe
investment
cases,
doesn't.
and it's like they're looking and say, "Oh, we don't anticipate you uploading the stuff we told you 2 years ago that you could take from your on-prem data center and just move it all into the cloud. Yeah, that's not going to work." It's like, cool, all right, so we'll do it over the next 10 years, right? Like, it's just a speed bump, dude. I just don't believe it.
I think you're assuming that this growth is continuous and infinite. And Moore's Law was a law for quite some time. Every year we doubled CPU capacity. We are quickly reaching the end of Moore's Law in our current technology stack. I'm just saying, I've seen enough weird things from ChatGPT that I don't know. I don't believe we know how the brain works. I don't believe that neural networks are actually doing anything. There's absolutely a possibility that we hit bigger roadblocks. And there's a reason Microsoft and Google and Amazon are all trying to temper expectations right now.
You sent me an article, and I can only see 20 lines because I have to pay
I
$400
know,
to
neither
read
of
the
us bought
blind.
the article.
And actually, in the bit of the article I can see, it says also privately said most of their customers are being cautious or deliberate about increasing spending on new AI services. It's a speed bump. People are being cautious and deliberate.
Sure, they're being cautious because the results aren't as good as what they were told they would be.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of NVidia, so NVidia had some releases ahead of, what is it? Do they have like user conference or something? The NVIDIA is hosting the GPU technology conference.
Yeah.
And promising some ridiculous performance improvements of their next generation chips, which is currently just a promise, but it does seem like their current chips are pretty dang good. And if they come even close to what they think they can do, then it'll get better. So it does sound like NVIDIA is continuing to ratchet up how much they think they can power some of these next generation models, which...
So that fixes the speed bump, right?
No,
There we
you're
go.
assuming it's not just a power issue, which, by the way, the power issue is insane. It's predicted to be 13,000 gigawatt hours of machine learning AI model consumption just on NVIDIA chips in the year 2024, which is more than the entire country of Guatemala uses.
Hey, you know what? That's job creation, though, right? Because we need to get people pedaling on those bikes, those stationary
Right,
bikes,
yes.
to power these things. So there's all the jobs for the software engineers.
Yep, it's that episode of Rick and Morty where they're all stepping on the flugel crank in order to power their entire world. Yeah, absolutely.
These guys are all over right now, NVIDIA, right? And I love them because of my gaming background. But we're talking about stock price that's tripled in a year. They obviously have their very publicized partnership with Snowflake, who's also riding high on the data cloud right now. So the in-store retail and AI and Gen AI in-store, like NVIDIA, let's just say I wish I bought that stock quite a few years ago. But yeah, they coming back from a couple of the conferences more recently. You know, these guys were there, and a lot of the conversation was centered around like the GPUs and the partnerships with NVIDIA. So yeah, they're going to build the future I want.
It'll just heat up the planet and burn a ton of electricity, and we can afford to pay the electric bill, the massive electric bill, and all of the carbon footprint that requires. And that's going to be billions of dollars of money that we can spend on an electric bill, but we can't just pay people a living wage. We can't pay the people who copy all of the content from places and train the models. We have to pay Global South pennies on the dollar to people, but we can pay the electric bill to fund the GPUs that need to run all of these things. Our choices are out of balance.
Half the engineers are going to be riding the bikes, and the other half are going to be holding big fans outside, cooling down the planet.
Cooling the data center.
What if this is the technology that leads us to curing cancer much quicker? No more diabetes, no more this, no more that. What if this is the foundation to all of that, right? Does it really matter how hot the planet gets?
Yep, definitely. We cured your cancer. Your house is now underwater because the ice caps melted and you have nowhere to live. And we haven't solved the housing crisis.
But again, it's funny you brought that up because I was talking to my son who's in college, oceanic engineering, right? And I'm sure that's not the correct term for it, but he's been stressing, like, hey, is there going to be a job for me?
Of all the jobs, ocean sea rise is a full-on thing.
That's what I said to him. I said, look, here's the deal. You're making me wish I went into that right now because if you look at the planet and we need to figure out where we need to live next, some of it's probably going to be on the water, underwater, or pretty close to the water.
It ain't Florida. Florida is not the place to live.
Exactly. But when I talk about the future and I talk about like, okay, maybe I've refined my thinking on the new jobs, I know it's a bit out there, but that's the type of thing that I'm thinking of is what happens when we start to build floating cities? And I know it sounds outlandish and sci-fi, but you know, you look at Dubai or wherever and they're like, hey, we got man-made islands, right? And you look at China, it's like, hey, we built this island that floats in the sea and for the military and blah, blah, blah. That's where I sort of see like, okay, is that what the jobs are? Is it changing the way we live? Is it tearing down the old cities? Like, you know, with remote work now, I look at cities and say, I know why they want us to come back to the office, right? Because they've got all these empty buildings. But are we looking at a new way of life, right? And is there going to be a lot more jobs in that new way of life? And that's why I started to get a little bit optimistic is, well, actually, maybe we start to change the way we think about building cities and homes and where we can live. But I still believe this is the foundation to that.
So as we kill the planet and refuse to address the things that are killing the planet, it is a jobs program to find ways to help the rich survive that transition. That's not a great argument. I get what you're saying, but I don't love that that is solving for America and Europe. That doesn't solve for Africa and South America and
Yeah, I guess, yeah, but
we should actually solve the real problem, not give ourselves jobs and be optimistic about our ability to help a couple of people survive the self-inflicted apocalypse.
yeah, but here's where we probably think differently about evolution.
Uh-huh.
In your evolution, you want the planet to stay the same, right? Because it's beautiful and gorgeous, and there's wildlife and trees and mountains. And I'm like,
I don't mind the idea of a floating city. I just wish that we didn't have to do it because the only choice was to survive the ice caps melting and the planet dying around us. I'm not opposed to the Star Trek future. I just don't think it needs to involve all of the current choices.
No, I know, but it won't be that we just build floating cities because we damage the planet. The freebie that you'll tack along with that is we will start to repair the planet because people will say,
now who's being the optimist?
no, we will. But I'm also willing to admit that we might not. And if we live in a dome because the Earth is 30 degrees hotter than it was, and we have to live in a dome that we've constructed around the planet, that's also a perfectly acceptable place to evolve into. Like, I'm sci-fi Jerry, so I don't worry about those. If we go live underground in underground cities and that's what we evolved to, that's what we evolved to, right? Like, I don't think evolution is like, you don't have these conscious moments of part of evolution because it happens over thousands of years, right? So wherever we end up is where we were meant to be, right? We're not perfect.
Absolutely not.
AI will make us more perfect, but destroying this planet is probably part of our destiny.
I should hope not.
I mean, you see the evidence of it though, right?
I do. And every single one of those were conscious choices by people with incentives and motives that we can choose not to repeat their bad choices.
But the science has been out for a long time. We know the causes, and we're still doing it. So,
because our systems are designed against us and people in power have ensured that they stay in power, doesn't mean that is also a thing that we've repeatedly undone, usually with some pretty bad violence, and I would prefer that we avoid the violence. We undid it in the 1920s. We ended the Gilded Age on purpose, so it doesn't have to be that way. Sure, NVidia is going to cure cancer. It's also possibly going to kill the planet in the process. I'm 50-50 on why that's a good trade-off.
Because it's not ultimately, you say this all the time, right? Like, it's us feeding the model. It's us destroying the planet. We're going to do it. AI, I don't think AI is necessarily evil because it's contributing to the speeding up or slowing down or the solving of the problems, right? It's still our normalization of deviance. We would still do that without AI. AI, I think, will cause the sting.
Sure, AI is just a giant can of gasoline. AI is just NVIDIA is a giant can of gasoline.
Yeah. And then after the sting, then comes the utopia.
Great. Speaking of AI that didn't go anywhere, Apple canceled its self-driving car project called Titan because it turned out they didn't think the models were going to be intelligent enough soon enough to make it a viable financial business for Apple. So 5,000 people were working on that at one point. It's currently down to about 1,400 people, and Apple has given those 1,400 people 6 months to find a new place in Apple or they'll be let go because Apple has admitted, which I will give Apple credit for. Absolutely, don't go down the Tesla route of killing people by trying to get them to do your self-driving car that isn't ready. Apple was like, nope, actually, I don't want that blood on my hands. The models aren't there yet. Computer vision isn't there yet. The ability to do this in a way that is financially viable. Maybe there's a version of a self-driving car that costs $510,000, and that wasn't a viable path for Apple too. One way or another, they correctly canceled it, and I think that's one of the rare times I will give Apple a round of applause.
Yeah, and you know my stance. I actually like companies. I like to think Apple learned something from their failure, right? That's the optimistic side of me. Is they probably learned a lot through this project, and
Sure.
it was an experience and a destination. I'm curious with this one though, with Apple, because Tesla is the iPhone of electric vehicles.
No, well, Tesla's public perception is the iPhone of
Exactly,
vehicles.
exactly. I'm not
It
talking
is
about the
not
product.
actually right.
I'm not talking about the product. I'm
Right.
talking about the obsession of the owners. Like
Sure.
Apple have created. When you see those people queuing for an iPhone, as an Android user, I laugh and I'm like, it's an iPhone, right?
Sure.
It's the same thing when I see people sort of wowing over their Tesla. I'm like, it's a car, right? But Apple were going up against the guys who created the iPhone of electric vehicles. They have that. People don't want anything else. They want a Tesla. So I thought it was a strange one for them to go after, because I mean they've been going after this since 2014, right? Like I said, that's when they launched the program.
If anything, I wonder in your metaphor that Tesla is BlackBerry, because BlackBerry was technically there first. People were obsessed with BlackBerry for a degree. You had entire executive class of people for many years who were like, I must have my BlackBerry. I worked with a CTO who would be in a meeting on his BlackBerry the entire time, and you never got his attention. Like, that was a product which had the perception of that, but its actual quality wasn't that great. And so when the iPhone came around and people were like, oh, actually, it turns out you can build a solid, reliable piece of hardware, which the Tesla is not. Apple had the opportunity. I actually kind of wondered that Apple had the opportunity to truly introduce a level of manufacturing standard that the Tesla absolutely is not. The Teslas fall apart with the bump of your shoulder.
Oh, I think you're being super harsh on the Tesla.
I am not. You can go watch any number of videos of people who have the X, who have the stupid looking Cybertruck. The manufacturing quality coming out of Tesla plants is poor. It is awful. Things aren't aligned. Things get stuck. Things fall off. No. The Tesla manufacturing process is a freaking Nokia phone compared to the iPhone. Apple would have actually produced some really interesting car hardware, and it's interesting that they chose not to do that. Now, maybe you're right. Maybe they were also calculating that the perception of the Tesla is a hard hurdle to overcome, and the market factor of that might absolutely have been a part of it. But I have no doubt that Apple is really good at hardware. It's expensive, and you get what you pay for. Their software sucks, but their hardware is solid. So had they decided to go down this road, I think there would have been an interesting thing. It would have been a $150,000 car, but so is Tesla.
Two things. One, the BlackBerry was not okay. The BlackBerry was amazing.
The BlackBerry lost to the iPhone pretty quickly because it didn't adapt.
It didn't adapt. What we're talking about when I make that statement, the Tesla is the iPhone. It's the perception. It's the cult.
Yeah, sure.
Buying them. And so I thought it was a strange one for Apple to go after. I agree with you. Apple, I do believe, would have made a far superior product, but I think we would have paid for it.
Oh, I mean, we always pay for it. Apple is always expensive.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one. It seems like they're walking away, like truly walking away. This is not something that's put on a hold. It's
right.
People are being repurposed. People are inevitably going to lose their jobs. So, But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go next. What they're going to do? Start launching rockets into space?
I mean, anything's better than Elon being in control of our national security.
Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, we should revisit that in a different episode. But yeah, that one's an interesting deal.
It's real bad when he's partially, a simp for Russian oligarchs and loves the autocrats in Eastern Europe, and then Starlink suddenly stops working for Ukrainian troops. It's not great.
Yeah, like those movies where the country goes dark and then Red Dawn, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it's
not
like
good.
AI is the precursor to Terminator, and Elon is the precursor to Red Dawn. So,
yep, that sounds right.
Maybe.
Well, speaking of Apple laying off the people working on the self-driving car, that's a general trend that is continuing in 2024. There were 260,000 tech job layoffs in 2023, and in just the first quarter of 2024, we're up to 50,000. So we're on pace for another really bad year of people being laid off. And I think there's a number of factors going into that, but it is absolutely a concerning trend. I think you can put some of that at the feet of AI. I think you can put some of that at the feet of Wall Street driven corporate culture, which prefers unlimited growth. And when you can't grow because there was economic issues, you grow by cutting costs. And yet the economy is growing. We're adding jobs. The economy is stable. Consumer sentiment is up. Inflation is down. The reason why a company would lay off tech workers in this environment is puzzling to me.
Yeah, I wonder if there's another factor here too, and it plays into what I gabble on about all the time, is I'm wondering if a lot of these companies are starting to realize that they're not running lean. It's the first thing Elon did when he took over X was, I can run this company on half the number of employees, right?
Turns out he couldn't, but yeah.
He couldn't, but he was only partially incorrect. He is still running the company, and he hasn't rehired all the people he let go. So he wasn't 100% wrong. And I actually wonder if we're just seeing a massive level set. It's almost like a global consciousness moment where companies are looking at projects and saying, "There's no revenue there, right? Like this division goes." Right?
That can't possibly be true because they are setting revenue goals. They are exceeding revenue goals.
No,
Their
no,
profit
they
margins are massive. There's absolutely money there. They just want it to go to the stock market and to the investors, and they want to do stock buybacks. You don't do a massive $2.3 billion stock buyback and then 3 months later fire a bunch of people without those two things being directly related to one another.
Yeah, and I'm not saying these companies aren't making money. I'm saying that there are divisions within those companies making money. And perhaps what we're starting to see is a lot of these companies shed the businesses that don't make money, right? And say, you're $150 million revenue, but your burn is 200 million, right? So we're done, right? So it is scary though. I mean, there's big names on this list, right? Am I allowed to say the names? Or will they come and get me? SAP 8,000, right? That's 7%. Cisco 4,250, that's 5%. I mean, these are top 20, 30 names in this list are Salesforce, Sony, eBay, Google, Citrix, Electronic Arts, right? These are big companies. Like, this is a lot of families.
And so let's just take the very first example, SAP, recent financial results. SAP exceeds non-IFRS operating profit and cash flow. Cloud revenue up 20%. Cloud backlog of 13.7 billion euros, up 25%. Cloud gross profit up 23%. Operating profit down 5%, but non-something or other up 9% and up 13%. Like, none of these numbers are bad. None of these numbers are lay off 8,000 people. And I get that, if you're Microsoft and you are letting Xbox be a loss leader for the past 20 years, maybe at some point you change your mind about that and those people no longer get a job. There's an argument there, but the general trend of the companies and the economy and the numbers that they report don't match those decisions.
Yeah, the beginning of the sting.
It probably is, and it's bad. If you're focused on getting your investor class and the vulture capitalists who are doing all of this stuff, if your goal is to get them money on the backs of a bunch of families that you're about to screw, at some point in human history that ends with pitchforks, torches, and the guillotine. So the Gilded Age managed to do that through convincing that they could just do regulation of the financial industry and stop that kind of stuff. And we didn't end up with a bunch of robber barons' heads on pikes. So maybe there's an option, there's a path out for some of these folks, but it's a bunch of weird choices.
And Christine Klein, who's the CEO of SAP, I believe he was the one who said 2024 will be the year AI moves from discovery to execution. So is 2024 the year it all starts?
And they mean execution like a firing squad. They're going to kill off a bunch of jobs, and
well played.
It's not good.
Well played. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. It's not news to me because maybe it's happening faster than I thought, but I just don't see right now. Remember, our destinations hopefully are the same. To me, there's a timeline problem in the speed at which the jobs will go, and then the creation of all those new jobs, or the post-scarcity scenario where countries start to take care of their citizens. Right.
Right.
Here's the gap. If this was the beginning of the sting, then how long until we start to see the rehiring? And in what new industries? And that's my problem all along, is the timelines won't match up.
Nope. So every one of our episodes is going to turn into why AI is bad and the sting is coming, which feels not great, but yay. We should rename the podcast The Sting.
Except that AI is not bad, right? Like,
I don't think we have any other news topics,
No,
right?
I added in at the Under Armour bit that, I was in that situation a few years ago. My photo got picked to be the backing for the literature for the Korean Biennale in 2008. And my first thought was like, hey, you're going to pay me. And they were like, no, but we'll give you photo credit. And I was like, that's fine, cool. But all those people that you're talking about who are worried about copyright and their work being stolen, I'm like, okay, fine. So we give them credit, but don't give them.
That's all they were asking
Okay,
for.
if that's all
all
they
the Under
want,
Armour team was asking for was
if
credit.
that's all they want,
And
then I agree with you. But if they
yeah.
start asking for dollars for their shitty efforts, like everybody's gonna want dollars. It's like, well, come on, like that's not worth. I'm not gonna pay you 25 cents every time this gets used, right?
Of course it is. That's how this system works. You can't argue that capitalism shouldn't be capitalism sometimes. You don't get to make a special carve out for artists not getting to reap the benefit of capitalism. In any other situation, when you do a licensing deal with a company and say, I'm going to use Salesforce for the next 5 years and all of the stuff that I want to get as a benefit of it, Salesforce says, great, pay me for
Then
that constantly.
that's the $1 billion idea: is protect the artists, right? Build the system, which is this is the only
That's what
sauce.
the Hollywood strike was for.
This is the only. This is the only version of the sauce. This is the vault. If anybody wants to use this, it comes out of the vault, and no illegal usage. Like that's the app. That's the app, is protecting artists' work because it's in a vault. Otherwise, tell the artist, don't put your shit online. I'm sorry, you release your song on YouTube, like someone's going to steal it. That's a reality. You shouldn't put it out there for free.
No. Garfield is a comic strip that gets published in national newspapers and gets paid to be used once in the newspaper, but also has a copyright claim so that you can't go, Jim Davis put Garfield out in the world, and so he deserves to get f***ed when someone goes and tries to put Garfield on a t-shirt. No. He has copyright claim to protect his IP. So if the people who filmed the Under Armour ad didn't get a good contractual protection about how they filmed it once and then it could be used in perpetuity, then yes, they should have done a better contract negotiation. But artists wanting to negotiate the usage of their art in perpetuity are absolutely within their right to do so.
But there's a line between real commercial art and then artists. And I'm saying,
nope,
on this side
not
of the
in the
line,
capitalist system.
I'm saying on this
not
side
in the
of the line,
capitalist system.
well, maybe we need to introduce that line, which is your work is turd. No one's going to pay you for it just because of reuse.
But then the AI, no, because then in your scenario, the AI finds the alleged turd, does some magic with it, and then someone does pay for it. Someone does think that the output is worth being paid for. The AI doesn't get to reap the reward and not pay the turd.
We put diamonds in your turd. Your turd is not worth $15 million. The diamonds are worth $15 million. We made your turd look good.
No one's saying that the turd is worth the 15 million. They're saying that you are getting some benefit of it. And if my art made you the 15 million and it's 2% of your art, yes, I deserve $300,000. Is that the right math? No, that's not the right math. $3 million. No. I don't know what the math is. I'm bad at math.
Hopefully, as we get more and more content of conscientious artists who don't care about making a quick buck, look, we can stop using the turds and we'll just use open source, creative freedom. It's like, cool, you want us to pay you for your turdy picture? We're not going to do that. We'll just use that one over there. And that'll be, not every artist can get paid.
No, any artist who gets used by this system should get paid if they haven't opted to go Creative Commons license or whatever that is. So the problem is not, you're arguing against an imaginary scenario that could absolutely happen in the future. In some imaginary future in which artists are given the ability to opt in and opt out and choose whether or not their art is licensed and available to the model, and the model adheres to that, then great. That is the system. But the system is not that today. The system doesn't give the artist choice. And so you don't get to determine whether or not art is good or bad. That's a bad thing. When humans start to do that, that is the start of fascism. That's a start of really bad things in human history. When we start deciding that this is degenerate art, I absolutely can. The very first thing that the Nazis started to do is identify degenerate art. It's a bad path. It always is a bad path. We don't get to choose good or bad art. If you want to develop a system in which artists can opt out and say, you don't get to use my art without compensating me, then you can.
There is a system.
There absolutely is not.
A system for opting out. Don't put your work online. Don't put your work online.
No, that is absolutely not. No one agreed 30 years ago when the internet started what the shitty consequence would be of posting your content online. That is not how it works.
We are derivative machines. So you can't pay every single artist for their work. Like I just fundamentally don't put your work out there. The internet is the greatest opt-in machine ever, because it's like, you know what? If you don't want your work to get reused, don't put it online. Sorry, don't put it unprotected online. Protect it.
There's no way to protect it online. Online is by default. What are you going to do?
Well, people are not going to start removing watermarks, right? Like, nobody's going to want to create a commercial version with my watermarked video.
Right, but the watermarked video, you don't get to decide. You don't get to be the arbiter. That the way that the internet has worked for the past 30 years is that I can post a video on Tumblr that is entirely mine. I'm not going to have it watermarked because I chose to share it with a bunch of people with the assumption that I was in a fan space and people weren't allowed to monetize it. You absolutely are expecting that. And so when they go and violate that and choose to use it, they have done so without the consent. It's absolutely, I don't care what the legal argument is. By the way, the Supreme Court's probably going to focus on this anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But no. The moral and...
I put a YouTube video up, right? And in 3 years, if I find that video on other websites linked with people using it and saying, hey, here's my Man City fan space, and look at these people, I'm not going to think to myself like, that's my video. You're building a community and making money, and my video content is on there. It's like, I put my shit on YouTube and I made it public. So have at it. So if these guys don't want their work to get stolen, then they need to start protecting their work, right?
No, so that is the entire reason why there was that video. H-Bomber guy did the video taking down James Somerton, who was a YouTube person who would go and plagiarize other people's work. You don't get to do that. Just because you put your video up on YouTube and then James Somerton decided to come along and plagiarize your work and try to get all of the ad revenue, absolutely you would have a case to go after it. That it doesn't...
Yeah, I don't worry about those people.
You should. That's the problem I have with all of your arguments in this world is you sound like the crappy tech bros who don't understand or care about art. And that's bad. You're bad at that. That's a bad opinion. I'm going to say that you're a bad person for having that opinion because it's bad. Art is good.
You call me a tech bro.
No.
You call me...
Yes.
You call me a tech bro. You know what?
Yeah.
You know what you got? I almost thanked you. I was like, that was like one of the nicest things you've ever said to me.
Absolutely meant as an insult.
I don't know. I just don't see it the same way. You want to protect everybody.
I know, and it's bad. It's bad that you want to take your personal interpretation and your limitation as a human being who doesn't appreciate good food and good art, and you want to screw entire industries as a result of it. Stop it.
I don't.
You guys are awful.
I don't want to screw them. I'm just saying.
You very, very much do.
I don't. I'm just saying you want everybody to be paid. And that's not going to work.
Yes.
No.
Yes, because you've skipped to the post-scarcity scenario, and you don't get to skip the step where we're still stuck in the capitalist system and the rent is due and the kids are hungry. You skipped the step. You don't get to skip the step.
I'd love talking about this stuff with you. I'm a tech bro.
It's awful.
I want that to be when we finally get the t-shirts.
You'll be the tech bro.
You can be, yours is going to be the idealist, and mine's going to be the tech bro.
No, yours is going to say tech bro, and mine's going to say I'm with stupid.
I love it, man.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us on this episode of Acceptance Criteria. If you liked what you heard, maybe go and drop 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and leave us a nice review. And if you didn't like what you heard, remember the name of the podcast is Triple Click. And also tell your friends if you like the show and that they should check it out. Some of the best podcasts out there grow by word of mouth, and we'd much appreciate it. To read articles that we've written on similar topics to the one we talk about here, head over to the blog at acceptancepod.com. You can also follow us on most apps. We're at AcceptancePod. We'll post links to show notes and any articles from the blog over there. We're also building a community on Reddit at r/acceptancecriteria and on Discord. You can find links to both in the show notes and on the blog. And I promise we'll be moderating the crap out of them to keep it a nice little slice of the internet. For now, I'm Kevin Thomas Euland, and you can find me on most apps at ktomasuland. That's ULLAND.
And I'm Tech Bro. And you can find me on most apps at Criteria Greeter. That's GREINER. And this has been Acceptance Criteria. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you.